I'm here with Isabelle Hau from the Stanford Accelerator for Learning and Michelle Kang from the National Association for the Education of Young Children. Thank you both for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tyler, for having us.
I wanted to start off, we're talking about AI today. Everyone is talking about it. Everyone seems to have a different way that they came into knowing about it, talking about it. Everyone has their own opinion. And I just wondered, for each of you, what sparked your interest and curiosity in the world of AI, specifically for learning?
So I would say for us at Stanford, AI has been a long-standing area of interest, so much so that the word artificial intelligence actually was invented and coined by a faculty member in computer science at Stanford in the 1950s. So we go back on this area of work for a long time, okay? And we had been doing a lot of work on AI and education well before ChatGPT got launched. This being said, I would say that the activity on Stanford campus since the launch of generative AI tools has magnified tremendously, both interest from faculty, from students, from a lot of our partners. So curiosity is really stemming from seeing all this activity and this profound, actually, time of human ingenuity that I'm seeing unfolding.
Sure.
With a lot of people thinking, creating, innovating with those new tools. That's very inspiring.
I was excited as we uncover new possibilities in education to see with some curiosity that AI was something that was first, I think, being fully embraced more on the K-12 and higher ed side. For me, it then became, how does this apply in the world that I live in, which is primarily early childhood and in the education of children 0 to age 8. I think that there are possibilities of being able to address challenges of how people do the work to lessen the load on educators, to build tools that might be able to help support family engagement, all with centering that what we know about early childhood is strong relationships, the adult to child relationships. So I'm excited about the possibilities of what we have ahead, but I still think there is much we don't know. And that is where I'm hoping my friend Isabelle and those talented people at Stanford will help us better understand how AI can, in its application, help us in early childhood education.
That's great. So with that little primer out of the way, maybe a little unconventional, but I wondered if you could both tell me a bit about what you do at your organization.
Yes. Well, I have the great humble privilege of being the Chief Executive Officer of the National Association for the Education of Young Children. It is the world's largest professional organization for early childhood educators. We connect practice, policy, and research, all in service to an ideal that every child should have access to high quality, affordable, accessible early childhood education with trained and caring, nurturing early childhood educators who know the best of early childhood development and can partner with families to provide that. We have 60,000 members all across the country that are present in every possible setting of early childhood, family childcare, in schools, in centers. And frankly, we talk about how our job is to find every possible way to elevate the lived experiences and center their work in all that we do, so that we can elevate the need for us to all be aware of and see the importance of investing in early childhood.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, its mission is to see better solutions that are connected to research at scale. So a lot of what I work on is connecting research with the real world. And real world could be education settings. It could be a lot of the private sector in the form of edtech developers or nonprofit organizations working in communities, and bridging the two. So bringing more research into practice, as well as getting practice closer to research. So it moves both ways and ideally together in a co-design manner.
Wonderful. Yeah, and we're very excited to have you both involved in the work of the EdSafe AI Alliance. And I wondered two things. Why do you feel that the work EdSafe is doing is so critical for this particular moment? And also, in what ways have you been involved with EdSafe and the SAFE framework that they're developing?
Yeah. So I have had the privilege to be invited to be part of the steering committee as an advisor, an observer of the committee. The reason why I joined the committee is because I want to see better responsible AI frameworks being used in practice and in policy realms. And the EdSafe AI Alliance is very well positioned to do this, given all the connections with Innovate EDU and all the other efforts that you have underway. But really, really excited about the need that we see from where I sit in research.
Sure.
To have better frameworks that can be used for responsible AI. And the SAFE framework is a great one, very, very usable, easy to understand for safety, privacy, accountability, and ethics more broadly, as well as equity. So very excited to see this work unfolding.
Wonderful, thank you. So I want to ask about. Everyone has an opinion on AI. Some people are super excited. Some are terrified. It seems everyone has some degree of apprehension. So what do you feel are some of the biggest challenges that exist around safe and equitable use of AI as we stand currently?
So on safety, on safety and equity, those are two big questions, okay? Let me maybe tackle equity first.
Sure.
Trying to be brief. So equity from a research perspective right now, there actually are some good news. The early research suggests that the early use of generative AI tools in education actually has an equalizer effect. Okay, so this is good news. This is the headline. Now, the issue is that this is when it's being used. So there are lots of issues about when and how it's being used. And those are inequitable because a lot of people do not have access to the internet, to devices, to this expensive GPT-4 that's $20 a month. So it's a big cost. So all these digital access questions, and then there are a lot of other questions about usage, where even if you have access to all of this, how are you being trained to use those tools in the most efficient and most effective way possible? And that requires a lot of professional development and professional learning opportunities, especially for educators and principals and education leaders. That is often unequitable, unfortunately.
Sure.
On safety and privacy. So safety, huge issue. A huge issue with those data sets and the appearance that they are safe. That you have a chatbot that you can enter something that, is seemingly innocuous. And I was sharing actually an example earlier of a teacher who was sharing with me in a very light way that she had entered all her student information data in ChatGPT and was very proud of having tried the tool. And I looked at her and I didn't want to hurt her feelings. So I was like, I was not sure if I was supposed to tell her that this was really unsafe. But this is fundamentally unsafe. So we need better frameworks for, and she was, by the way, doing it with a lot of positive intentionality, meaning she wanted to try, she wanted to innovate, she wanted to do the best for her students. So all this is like coming from a place of such a beautiful place of strength. but it's at a risk of safety for students who, obviously, private information on students should not be shared on those platforms. So how do we educate our teachers and our community on both the potential, but also the risks and the right usage of those tools? How do we have the right frameworks for schools to use those tools safely?
Michelle, what's your perspective? And I wonder if you have a particular perspective regarding early childhood education and how it relates there.
Yeah. Well, Isabelle brought up some really good examples, and I'll build on, starting with the safety example, thinking about data and how it's utilized and what information is out there. I heard a story of someone who's talking about the possibilities of could we use what I'll say a friendly robot that gathers information about a child and learning and receives inputs on how that child is speaking and interacting and even their family. Where does that information go? And how does that then feed into the broader environment of then the universe of information that AI is being utilized? Have some concerns about, does it know context of that data, maybe being English as a second language learner, or maybe context of access to technology? How do we make sure that that information is handled safely and appropriately? And I think there's still many questions about that, because the possibilities are, if we're able to leverage that to be able to help support an educator and being able to provide that high quality early learning, which is steeped in relationships. Early childhood is all about high quality relationships between adults and children, between fostering that from child to child and learning how to navigate that. So it gives me some pause to think about some of those inputs, then thinking about from an equitable side, like, again, where is that information being utilized?
Sure.
As a test, thinking about my own education around AI, I actually put into ChatGPT, what is developmentally appropriate practice? Because I was curious if it would provide me information of what we know, talking about relationships, about context, about joyful learning in play. And it was pretty good. But there was some words in there that gave me pause and made me wonder, again, where was it pulling from? Now, I wasn't using the paid ChatGPT tool, and I later learned, I'm going to try it again, actually using that, because I've heard that it's a better resource. Yeah. But as I see from an equity standpoint, we already know that there's inequitable access to technology in many communities, particularly communities that are, challenged from a socioeconomic view, that, racial disparities. How do we ensure that as we are contemplating AI and its use in early childhood, that it is addressing that we need to have, equitable access, that we need to have an understanding of where the information is coming from, and to be able to filter on it and understand and teach responsibly that right now, I would not necessarily feel confident that anything ChatGPT passes out to me is 100%.
Sure.
But I'd like to think that hopefully we could get it to a place where it's pretty good, but I do think the sources of data is a question in my mind, and that goes back to your question about both privacy and equity.
Great, appreciate that. We spend a lot of time talking about either the challenges, the dangers, but there's also big opportunities and possibilities here. So what do you feel are some of the most exciting or dramatic opportunities that exist with AI at the moment?
I'll start with three things that have come to mind when I think about, once you get through the privacy question and you get through the equity question, I think there's some exciting opportunities. One that comes to mind immediately is thinking about the role of the educator, and in particular with early childhood. How are the ways that AI could potentially be used as a way to support an educator to have access to resources and professional development, just in real time, to be able to help support them in the work that they do in programs? I could see some real interesting possibilities there in terms of being able to support the educator. Another one, continuing on that thread, is there is administrative burden that educators and programs and leaders have, that I could see AI again being an opportunity to be able to help lessen the burden, so that then they are able to spend more time doing what they do best, which is to invest in the relationships and to spend more time with children and parents. So could AI be used to put together a note, a newsletter for the family and family engagement? Could it be used to track enrollment and provide, a better way instead of having to do enrollment the way that it might be done right now? And also enable programs then to be able to let interested families know where there are openings, and again, in a more elegant way. And the last one is one that I'm particularly excited about, is about language. It's very costly to have translation, and with children and families who may not have English as their primary language, it can be very difficult for educators to be working with families and with children without the native language. Could there be a way that AI could be used to help bridge that gap and to then be able to create that culturally, appropriate linguistic education in a form that leverages AI as a tool for good? So I think there's some possibilities that I'm very excited about as ways to help make early childhood education easier and less difficult and burdensome, especially for the educators, but also even better for the families and for the children.
Great. Thank you.
I would add to those great points, and maybe thinking about slightly older children, that I see a huge opportunity for better engagement and motivation, which is obviously a huge issue right now in education. 2/3 to 3/4, depending on the surveys of high schoolers, say that they don't like school, they don't like learning. That's an issue. That's a big issue, as we say. So can AI tools be used as a way to engage students as their own agents of change? So we are studying, for example, at Stanford, what we call teachable agents, which is a fancy word to say that students can actually become teachers and teach the AI. And we know from learning science that if you are teaching, you are actually learning more. So effectively leveraging this technology to pair that with what we know from learning science and have students as creators and agents of their own learning is an area that I'm very excited about.
Great, thank you. So I wonder if you could answer a thought experiment here, which is, it's such a complicated issue, obviously, from the conversation we've been having. There's so many different angles to look at it. But if it were up to you, if you could create one thing at this moment around safe and equitable AI in education, what do you think that would be, and where would that lead us?
I'm going to be totally self-serving. I would invest in research. Actually, I believe it too. So I believe that we need a lot of research right now on both the near-term impact on these technologies. Where do they work? For whom? Who is being served? Who is not? On the educator-facing, but also student-facing technologies. And we also need to invest in long-term research on what is the impact on the brain of those technologies. And anyway, so lots of really interesting questions from a research standpoint.
Great.
Well, I'm going to say +1 on research, because I think that there is so much we need to understand and know and learn. AI has a lot of potential and possibilities. And I'll say in early childhood, there's a lot of trepidation. Much the same way, I'll say, though, when technology was first brought up as a tool for programs in early childhood. And in the same way that we navigated understanding what does technology mean in terms of a tool for supporting what high quality learning is, I put AI in that same category. So I think we need more studies. So I'm going to say, yes, let's have more research. And I also think that AI has a lot of possibilities in terms of improving the overall landscape and challenge of early childhood. And we know it can't solve the compensation challenge for early childhood educators. So I'll just name that because we know that that is something that exists within the system. But there are other places, like the challenge with families for supply and demand. I would love if there was some way for us to use AI to connect the dots with programs who have openings and parents who need that care. And if there was a real-time way for us to be able to plug the gap there and have parents be able to access quality care and then programs to be able to fill those slots, which then help the economics of their program, I think that could be a potentially transformational way for AI to be applied.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, this has been a very wide-ranging conversation. Got some great perspectives from different vantage points, but also very similar concerns and similar points of view. Isabelle, Michelle, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Tyler, for having me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.